When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
This episode is brought to you by Lifetime. Parenting vlogger Ruby Frankie was a model mother to her following of over 2.5 million people until she began to follow the guidance of family counselor Jody Hildebrandt. Based on a true story, watch as the influencer becomes the influenced by a master manipulator. Mormon Mom Gone Wrong. The Ruby Frankie story. Premiering Saturday at 8. Part of Truly Unbelievable Movies. A ripped from the headlines event. Only on Lifetime.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Killed. I am your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast production. In this week's episode, we will discuss some of the events that have occurred over the past week. I want to touch on the Amy Mihaljevic story published in the Advertiser Tribune out of Sandusky, the Delphi trial, and the update on a former case that I covered that involved serial killer Bruce Lindahl. So let me get straight to the article that James Renner reposted on Twitter with the quote, "Take it with a grain of salt, but they may have the Amy Mihaljevic suspect in custody," unquote. So this would obviously be huge news if this were the case. Since this article was published in the quote Advertiser Tribune and hasn't been picked up by any other outlets, I am going to have to explain why this is probably a nothing burger. First of all, there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of people interviewed in the Mihaljevic case. They never really had a solid list of suspects, so it's a stretch for this reporter to make this connection. He actually says in there that he believes that they have one of the suspects in custody. And again, I really want to emphasize this has not been picked up by anyone else. Second, the article says that the person in custody looks eerily similar to the suspect sketch. Okay, so did millions of dudes in 1989. Chief Spetzel told me the sketch was too generic. He was very skeptical on releasing it, but again, they didn't have much to go on. So if you add in the fact that no one else is covering this, I'm going to have to say that this isn't anything. Now, it's not to say that it won't turn into something, but I'm not holding my breath. So if you want to listen to the latest information, which is new DNA that they found just 2 weeks ago, you can listen to my last episode I did with Nick from True Crime Garage, where we talked about the latest DNA. And again, let me just say this to all the people who listen. When there is an arrest, it will be absolutely huge news. Because Amy's case is definitely one of the most important cases, or at least the most followed case in the Northeast Ohio area. So it will be huge. So let's move on to the murder trial in Delphi. Richard Allen is on trial for the gruesome murders of Abby Phillips and Libby German. I've seen a lot of good information from people on Twitter, but I've also seen some very unnecessary speculation and vivid descriptions of some of the evidence. I had the chance to meet Kelsey German, and she has been on Who Killed a number of times, and I hate to see some of this stuff that's being posted because it's just like traumatizing them all over again. So at the end of the day, two families want to see justice, And sometimes people covering the trial get a little, I don't know what the right word is, but salacious, and they start posting things that are a little too graphic. And I understand that some of this stuff is being said and being told in court, but just be mindful of the fact that there are families involved. But with that being said, here are some of the things that we have learned in the first few days of the trial. So they have had eyewitnesses testified, and they were claiming to have seen a man on the Monon High Bridge, and that was on the day of the murders. And they believe this is the bridge guy. And the trial has revealed contents from Libby's phone, which provided insights into the girls' movements before their deaths. Again, the witnesses have described the quote-unquote bridge guy as being overdressed for the weather that was that day, and he was giving off weird vibes. One witness stating that the photo released by police influenced her memory of the man she saw. So Richard Allen has pleaded not guilty, of course, to the charges of murder. He was arrested in 2022. Now, this was 5 years after the murders took place. The defense has, and unsuccessfully, mind you, attempted to introduce an Odinism theory during the trial, and Allen faces a maximum prison term of 130 years if convicted on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of felony murder. The trial has included, again, digital experts, a forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsies on the teens. Of course, this case has garnered tons of attention, and as I said before, I've seen some good stuff come out on Twitter, and I've seen some bad stuff. So mind yourself when you're posting. That's all I'm trying to say. So some of the evidence that they've presented so far is, again, the eyewitnesses and the phone data. And then there's the crime scene evidence. Now, investigators found an unspent round at the crime scene, which the prosecution argues could have come from Richard Allen's Sig Sauer pistol. No direct contact found on devices, so data extracted from 23 of Richard Allen's devices showed no direct communication with the girls. However, the phone Allen used in 2017 when the girls were killed was not among the devices analyzed. Interesting. Video footage was played, and that was the video footage from Libby's phone. The unsealed court documents reveal that Richard Allen's gun was linked to the crime scene, providing a significant piece of evidence in the case. Now, the defense team has argued that he is innocent and that the real perpetrators are members of a pagan white nationalist cult, and that is the Odinist theory. And again, this is something that they consider a ritualistic sacrifice, which is, I don't know where to begin with that one. The defense has also accused investigators of intentionally withholding evidence that could prove Allen's innocence and have sought to have the case dismissed on those grounds. Now, there has been no alibi provided by Richard Allen. So again, the Odinism theory in this context is a form of modern paganism that draws inspiration from the Norse mythology. And here are some key points. So it's sometimes linked to white nationalist groups, and the defense has suggested that members of such a group could be the real perpetrators. So the theory was introduced based on the arrangement of sticks found over the bodies of the victims, which the defense argues could indicate a ritualistic pattern. Again, the defense has sought permission from the court to present this theory to the jury, arguing that it is a plausible alternative explanation for the murders. The defense has sought expert testimony from specialists in Odinism to help support their argument. Now, of course, the judge has previously ruled against presenting this theory due to the jury, because of the lack of evidence. But the defense has continued to try and push this. So theory is part of the defense strategy to provide an alternative explanation for the evidence presented against Richard Allen and to challenge the prosecution's narrative of the case. Again, these are just some of the facts that we've learned in the first few days of the trial. There are some good people to follow. I would recommend the Defense Diaries on Twitter. They are on the ground in Delphi, and they are pretty reliable, and they are very cognizant of what they are doing. So follow them and check them out on the podcast world, because they are a great podcast as well. And so with that being said, let's move from the Delphi case just up the, over into Chicago area, which would be the Kathy Halle murder, and that occurred in 1979. Now, this serial killer, Bruce Lindahl, has been connected to this case. Back in 2020, I covered the case of Pamela Maurer. DNA evidence showed that Miss Maurer had been murdered by Bruce Lindahl in 1976 in Lisle. The DuPage County State's Attorney Office had been using a new type of DNA analysis that was basically the same as what they used to catch the Golden State Killer. And then again, investigators determined that Bruce Lindahl had abducted the teenager as she left a friend's house to go buy a soda. And more than 4 decades ago, authorities had found 16-year-old Pamela dead on the side of the road in western suburban Lisle. She had been raped and strangled, most likely with a rubber hose that had been found near her body. So in 2020, authorities announced they had identified a serial killer responsible for her 1976 rape and strangulation. Again, using that DNA, they were able to connect her murder to a serial killer named Bruce Lindahl. Now, unfortunately, he died in 1981. Quote, "I suspect him to be the serial killer," Lisle Police Detective Chris Loudon said of Lindahl at a news conference. Quote, "We finally put a name and a face to this monster." Now, in a significant development in the cold case of Kathy Halle, a 19-year-old from Illinois who was tragically murdered in 1979, has been solved. Again, DNA technology has linked the crime to Bruce Lindahl, the deceased serial killer. Now, Lindahl passed away in 1981. The interesting thing about Lindahl, and you can listen to the episode that I did on his case and Pamela, he actually was in the process of murdering somebody and accidentally stabbed himself and died in the process of committing a murder. So kind of a stupid guy, but got away with a lot of killings and was definitely a monster. So the breakthrough came from familial DNA, which was obtained in another case, which matched the DNA found on Halle's clothing. Now, the evidence was 9.4 trillion times more likely to have originated from Lindahl, conclusively linking him to the murder. The North Aurora Police Department, in collaboration with other agencies, had reopened the case and utilized modern DNA analysis to bring closure to this 4-decade mystery. And again, Lindahl cannot be brought to justice because he is dead. She was only 19 when she was abducted in 1979. Now, this was March 29th of that year, and she left her home with the intention of picking up her sister from the Northgate Shopping Center, but had never arrived. Her disappearance sparked an extensive search, and weeks later, on April 24th, her body was discovered in the Fox River. And again, despite efforts by law enforcement, the case remained unsolved for over 4 decades. And of course, the family and the community did not have closure. So Kathy's case, like many cold cases, like Amy Mihaljevic's, lingered in the cold case unit. But with the use of this fancy new DNA technology, we are now seeing some of these cases finally be solved. And like Nick and I discussed last week about the Amy Mihaljevic DNA, is that the DNA they now have will be able to point to a perpetrator opposed to the DNA they previously had that was only able to identify a certain demographic. So, again, with all this being said, there's been a lot of stuff happening in the world of true crime. But with this latest update in the Kathy Halle case, I wanted to play you the press conference that was just released 2 days ago. And that way you can get a full grasp of how they came to this conclusion and how they solved the case. And you know I love playing these, so take a listen and enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Chief Joseph DeLeo, and I wanted to thank you all for joining us today on what is both a solemn and proud day for our community. We have a significant announcement regarding the 1979 cold case homicide of Kathy Halle, a case that has weighed heavily on the hearts of many for far too long. This achievement is a testament to the relentless dedication and hard work of the members of the North Aurora Police Department since 1979. Their commitment to seeking the truth and serving our community has never wavered, even as the years passed without answers. Each investigator involved in this case exemplified perseverance, going above and beyond to ensure Kathy was never forgotten. I want to specifically commend the hard work and dedication of Investigator Ryan Pete, Sergeant Kyle Jensen, and retired investigator Paul Dilley. I also want to highlight the incredible advancements in forensic science that have transformed our approach to cold cases. Techniques that were once unimaginable are now possible, allowing us to uncover new evidence and bring closure to families who have wanted justice for far too long. I must extend our deepest gratitude to our partners in law enforcement that have collaborated with us on this case over the years. The support from King County State's Attorney Jamie Mosser and her office were invaluable. Their expertise and commitment to justice helped guide our efforts every step of the way. We are also grateful to the Illinois State Police Crime Lab and the DuPage County Crime Lab, their guidance and support as the investigation progressed. A special thank you goes out to the Seasons of Justice for their financial assistance, which has made a significant impact on our investigative efforts. Their commitment to supporting law enforcement in solving cold cases has been vital to our success. Finally, I want to acknowledge the exceptional work of DNA Labs International, located in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Their innovations and dedication to forensic science played a pivotal role in our breakthroughs, and we are grateful for their partnership. Today, we honor Kathy Halle and her memory, and we pledge to continue our efforts to ensure that every victim receives the justice they deserve. I'd like to now hand over the briefing to Detective Ryan Pete, who will provide an overview of the case and update you on our current progress. Thank you.
Afternoon, thank you for being here. Start this out. So Kathy, on March 29th, 1979, Kathy Halle left her home on Volk's Court here in North Aurora. She left to pick up her sister at the Northgate Shopping Center and never arrived. For the next 3 weeks, the case was investigated as a missing person. On April 24th, 1979, Kathy's body was discovered in the Fox River. At that time, the Illinois State Police was assisting in a homicide investigation. As the case was worked over the next several decades, it was deemed a cold case, and no new evidence was available for several years. In the early 2000s, as new DNA technology was emerging, North Aurora detectives began to collect DNA from people connected to Kathy. All of those tests produced negative results. In September of 2019, Lisle Police Department reopened the Pam Maurer case and found familiar DNA that linked Bruce Lindahl to their homicide. As the investigation progressed, Lindahl's remains were exhumed and DNA comparisons were shown to have a positive match, indicating Lindahl was the killer in the Pam Maurer case. In 2020, North Aurora detectives began to look back into the Kathy Halle case, and they were able to meet with the investigators from Lisle PD. As part of that investigation, evidence in this case was inventoried, inspected, repackaged here at the North Aurora Police Department. Some of that evidence was sent to the DuPage Crime Lab for additional testing. The evidence from the DuPage showed that there was a mixture of two individuals. However, any DNA that was located was too degraded to create a working profile. In December of 2022, North Aurora learned that there was a box of evidence at the Naperville Police Department that included belongings of Bruce Lindahl. Some of that evidence showed Lindahl would have frequented the Northgate Shopping Center, which is where Kathy was employed at the time of her death. Around that time, I attended the Niemer Lead Homicide course, and one of the instructors there was Orland Park Deputy Chief Larry Rafferty. Larry presented a block of instruction on DNA technology, most notably the MVAC DNA vacuum and its ability to collect DNA from older cases. And we were able to see that that technology can generate profiles from where other testing cannot. In January of 23, I reached back out to Larry Rafferty and we discussed DNA technology and some of the labs that offer the MVAC technology. He recommended DNA Labs International out of Deerfield Beach, Florida. Through this discussion, Deputy Chief Rafferty recommended reaching out to Kara Stephenson, a forensic science specialist with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. We were going to discuss best options going forward with what evidence she believed would be able to produce the best results for us. In February, the North Aurora Police Department and our administrative staff met with Cassandra Pressler from DNA Labs International to discuss testing plans and the cost of advanced testing. During this conversation, Ms. Pressler suggested we reach out to Season of Justice. She explained Season of Justice is a nonprofit organization that provides grants to laboratories for DNA testing to assist solving cold cases. At that point, Sergeant Jensen reached out to Seasons of Justice and applied for a cold case grant. We later found out that we were awarded a grant to cover the cost for this testing at these advanced labs. In June of 2023, detectives from North Aurora Police Department drove the evidence from this case to Deerfield Beach, Florida, and dropped it off with DNA Labs International. In August of 24, North Aurora Police Department received a report from DNA Labs International that showed that DNA, approximately 9.4 trillion times more probable to have originated from Bruce Lindahl, was present on Kathy's clothing. So it is our belief that on the night of Kathy's disappearance, Lindahl was able to abduct Kathy in the parking lot of her apartment complex. He then drove her to the area of the Fox River where her body was later discovered. Besides this case, Lindahl has been connected to several other cases in this area from that time frame. With this new evidence, along with the evidence from similar cases involving Lindahl, we are able to conclude Lindahl was responsible for the death of Kathy Halle. Bruce Lindahl killed himself while committing another murder in Naperville in 1981. So I will now hand it over to Steve Du Bois, or Chief DeLeo, I guess. With Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Du Bois from DNA Labs International, the lab that was used at the very end of this investigation. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about all the detectives, all the crime scene personnel, everyone that was involved in this chain. If that chain had been broken anywhere, we wouldn't be here today. So with all of those people involved, we were able to come and get to this conclusion. The piece of equipment that we talked about, the MVAC, to put it in a very simple term, it is a DNA wet vac. And the scientists are all going to, I'm a retired law enforcement, the scientists are all going to get mad at me for describing it that way, but that's the simplest term. It sprays a solution onto a piece of evidence and then it sucks it back up. It's much better than just swabbing that piece of evidence because that solution will get into the fibers and then be pulled back and you can get evidence. You can get DNA. Now, with this particular case, with the body having been in the river for 3 weeks, it was very important that we get every bit of evidence, every bit of DNA that we could possibly get. And the MVAC was one of the techniques that we used. So we would just like to thank all the detectives, everyone involved, all the crime scene personnel, because I'm going to go back to it. If that chain had been broken somewhere in the year from 79 to now, we wouldn't be here today. So just thank those detectives. We're glad that the North Aurora was able to reach out to us. I will also say Cassie Pressler, who is our cold case reviewer, one of our main reviewers, worked on this case for a long time. She spent a lot of time on it with the detectives, going over the evidence. And that's what cold cases need. They need a teamwork of the detectives, the forensic people, and our lab, we've been in business for over 20 years. We're one of the largest private DNA labs in the nation. We've handled hundreds of thousands of samples. So you come to us because you need speed or you need new technology. And that's what we're able to use in this case was new technology. Thank you.
Up next, I'd like to call our King County State Attorney, Jamie Mosser.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to extend my condolences again to Kathy's family. To lose somebody in such a violent way and then just to live year after year not knowing what happened to her or who did it is a nightmare that no one wishes upon anybody. I would like to echo the words of Chief DeLeo that but for the work of the detectives and the hardworking men and women here at the North Aurora Police Department, we would not be here today. They're obtaining the evidence, repackaging the evidence, and continuing to try to find justice for Kathy is the reason why we're here today. Upon the discovery of this new DNA evidence, the North Aurora Police Department asked me to review the file to see if we would file any charges. We reviewed the facts of the case that happened in 1979, and we also reviewed the other cases that were identified to be related to Bruce Lindahl during that time period. Because of the pattern and practice of how he would abduct and murder his victims, we found that to be similar to what happened with Kathy in 1979. The evidence that was obtained and then eventually identified through DNA evidence was also thoroughly reviewed by my office because this is not typical of how we would work DNA because this is ever-evolving technology. We found that science was good, that it did in fact show that the DNA that was found on Kathy's clothing belonged to Bruce Lindahl. As such, had he not killed himself while in a murder, we would have authorized first-degree murder charges against Bruce Lindahl, and we would have proceeded to trial on that. Because he is passed away, we're not going to posthumously do any charges, but to the family, I want you to know that this would have been a case we would have charged. We would have actively prosecuted it, and I'm confident that based on the work of the detectives at North Aurora and all the scientists involved with the DNA labs, we would have finally obtained justice for Kathy.
Our next speaker, the family has a prepared statement. Deputy Chief Gorski has been a liaison for the family and the PD for a number of years, so we found it fitting for him to read that statement.
Good afternoon. Before I read the prepared statement from the Halle family, I would like to request that members of the media respect the family's wish to privacy. This will be the only statement made to the media on behalf of the family. We ask that any further questions be directed to the North Aurora Police Department or the King County State's Attorney's Office. The statement from the Halle family, October 2024. While revisiting this case has been incredibly difficult for our family, we are deeply grateful to finally have closure after 45 long years. Thanks to advancements in DNA technology and groundbreaking investigative tools, we are hopeful that other families won't have to endure the same pain and uncertainty that we faced for so many years. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the North Aurora Police Department and all the agencies and organizations involved for their dedication, persistence, and for never giving up, even when the odds seemed impossible. The kindness and respect shown to our family during this journey will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mayor Gaffino.
Good afternoon. I'm going to go off script here a little bit, I'm sure, just to kind of bring some context into this event here. Kathy and I were the same age, lived in North Aurora the whole time. I remember as a 19-year-old, it was pretty scary, this whole event that went on here, you know. So North Aurora never had issues like this. So here I am today speaking to you all. So I'm going to echo Chief DeLeo today. It's a solemn occasion for many reasons. It's also an occasion that reflects the strength of our community and immense pride I feel in our North Aurora Police Department. I've always had that pride for decades of work and commitment to find answers. North Aurora has always had a police department that strives to put our community first and support its members from the smallest of incidents to horrific tragedies such as this. To see the department continue to work this case year after year, even when the technology did not exist to pursue such leads, never give up, achieving justice for Kathy Halle and her family. It makes me so proud to be a resident of North Aurora and the mayor as well, and so grateful for the hard work, dedication of our officers. While I truly hope such tragedy never befalls another family, it brings me such pride and hope in our department to know that we will never stop working to find the answers, to bring those accountable for such acts to justice, and that we'll always be there for our community. To which I will now like to address Halle family. I cannot even begin to imagine the pain you suffered over these many years, losing Kathy. There are the years of no answer. The years of grieving have to continue on without her. And then this past year, we're answered her at hand, but those painful memories and feeling lost were revisited. And while I know there is no clear timelines to such grief might fade, might become a little less painful, I do pray that you can find a measure of peace with the answers uncovered. Please know that our Northgate community is always here for you in whatever way possible. Thank you.
And I just have to convey my appreciation to Mayor Gaffino, the village board, Administrator Bosco. Never really know what cases like this entail, finding finances that weren't in the budget, getting permission to travel out of state. There's a lot of things in play that you just think it's simple just to go solve the case. So in closing, I would like to thank you all for coming today. You heard the comments from Investigator Ryan Pete, the statement from State's Attorney Jamie Mosser regarding the offender in this case, Bruce Lindahl. The North Aurora Police Department will now finally consider this case closed. After meeting with the Halle family, I saw their continued grief firsthand. As we discussed the new developments in the case, I know this was not easy for the Halle family, and I sincerely hope that the news of the closure of the case can bring them a sense of peace. As we conclude this press conference, I want to remind everybody they will not be taking any questions today. Please also respect that they do not wish to be contacted in the future with any inquiry requests. Now, if there are any final questions from the press, I'd be happy to take some. So, like as Ryan Pete said, Lyle PD had the DNA sample. This then allowed us to send this to a lab to match. We're hoping that this leads to future cases. Investigator Pete reached out to local communities saying, hey, we solved this. Here's how. If you have any questions, you could contact Lyle PD, North Aurora PD, or anybody else in the area. Ryan, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, so again, Lyle's case on this was the henchpin that kind of like set the dominoes falling on this. So thank you guys for that. With this case, we were able to do a direct comparison to Bruce Lindahl himself from the work that they did on their case. So we were able to take that evidence and then do a direct comparison. So having a known offender in the system made that a lot easier for us to be able to positively identify him as the offender in there.
Do you expect that there might be more victims that you're looking into, or that?
There are several cases that have incredible circumstantial evidence, but it's irresponsible to say yes or no without having definitive proof like we have in this case here today.
Did you ever interview Lindahl about her disappearance?
During the time, that was before my time.
I can't answer that question, honestly.
I don't know.
You talked a little bit about cost involved. Can you give us some idea of how much
Sure.
this costs to do?
So it's all dependent on how many items of evidence you have. For example, how many pieces of evidence do we have? Do you know?
A lot.
Okay, so we met with DNA Labs International, and the initial cost was just under $23,000. So what we did then, we met and you pick which evidence you think would be most conducive to getting a match, and you do it in batches. So the first batch was going to cost us around just under $10,000, I would say. Seasons of Justice, when Kyle applied for the grant, we received the grant for $6,700. So really a cost to the village of under $3,000 to solve a cold case. But yes, that was new for all of us as well.
The MVAC has been around for a while. It just hasn't been filtered into a lot of the state laboratories, so it's not readily available for like local agencies to use on a no-cost basis. So my owner, if she decides there's a piece of technology that's going to help solve these cases, she can go out, get it, put it online, get it validated, 6 months. State lab, that might take a little bit longer. So we're just going to have newer technology. The MVAC, literally, it's as simple as I said. It sprays that sterile solution onto, most of the time it's clothing, but we've used it on a lot of different items. I think the very first case it was used on was a rock. It has to be a porous, semi-porous piece of evidence. It gets down into all the little nooks and crannies, and then that sterile solution is sucked back up. It's literally like a wet vac. That solution is then poured through a filter, and that filter is what's moved forward Normally you'd swab something, so that filter kind of replaces the swab. It's an amazing piece of equipment, and used properly, it can move a case forward that has evidence that might be degraded, might not have been in the best environment. There are all sorts of things that can be used. But the other thing is, in like 2017, all the DNA kits that were created were upgraded. They're much more sensitive, and they're getting more sensitive every day. So the very thing we use to create the profiles is now more sensitive. So you have all of these technologies that are built on each other, and you're able to get things that you didn't get before. I think, if DNA had been back way back when they tested anything, they would have probably not found anything, because there are limits, what they can see and what inhibits the DNA. We can go much lower now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think can you then disambiguate between two different sources?
Yes. The other great thing about any lab that uses it, a lot of the federal labs use it too, it's called Star Mix. If you have mixtures of multiple people, this will separate them. And I'm gonna butcher this scientifically. I'm a retired cop, like I said, I'm not a scientist. But it basically separates them out and allows us to then compare. Like here we actually did the sample of the suspect for the other agency. It allows us to take that STR, that short tandem repeat, which is the normal forensic profile you use, and compare it to the evidence. So we had both of them. This wasn't like CODIS, it wasn't put in the national database. They were a one-to-one comparison. So when you get that and all of those dominoes fell in place, we get this kind of result.
Did you say that the DNA was found on her clothing, inside her clothing, or on her body, skin, whatever?
So all the articles that we tested were clothing. So when I originally met with Ms. Stephenson from the Cook County's office, we kind of devised a plan as to where we thought the strongest evidence would be, and we started with that, and we just happened to hit a home run on our first try. We started with their clothing. And
what type of DNA was it? Or was it
was just
skin, hair?
I don't know that for sure. Yeah, it was a.
Detective, can you speak just kind of more broadly about the importance of solving a case like this and being able to bring this home after so many years?
Yeah, this is a tough one for us. I guess that the solemn pride in it is that it doesn't save Kathy, it doesn't hold any justice for Bruce, but it's we're the pride that we were able to give closure to the family on this. That was really important to us, and like for me personally, like all my mentors coming up the ranks worked on this case, and then I got to be the one that typed case closed, which is a really neat, like, little feather in my hat for that. So it was that was just that part. Yeah, it's just kind of a humbling pride.
Well, we really appreciate you all coming today. Go contact us in the future. But like I said, and I know you're all respectful, the family just doesn't want to be contacted anymore. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode of Who Killed. Please keep an eye on the Delphi trial as it is going on. And again, follow the Defense Diaries on Twitter. You can follow me at Bill Huffman 3. I rarely post anything about the case because of the fact that I don't really want to get in the way of justice. So let's hope that they will continue to provide evidence that shows that Richard Allen is the killer, and these families can have some sense of, I'm not going to say closure because that's not something we do here, but some idea of who did this, and they can at least put a bookend to this horrible chapter. So again, follow that case, follow what's going on with the Bruce Lindahl stuff. He keeps getting connected to murders. Who knows how many people he actually killed. And again, as I mentioned, you can follow me on Twitter at Bill Huffman 3. And I drop new episodes every Friday, so stay tuned. And as always, until next time, be healthy and stay safe.
Hi, this is Amy and Vanessa from She Goes by Jane, where we shine light on the stories of missing and unidentified women. On November 7th, we're sharing Nahita's story for the first time in a podcast, and this is a story that I thought I knew, but after reading police reports, became more complicated than I thought. When investigators are called to Nahita Khatib's house, everything looks fine. Her purse is on the kitchen table, her cup of coffee is on the counter, and her 2-year-old niece is in her playpen. The only thing amiss? Nahita is missing.
Every week, we feature a poem written in honor of the person we're talking about. This week, we're joined by one of our favorite actresses. You might know her from Sister Act or King of the Hill or The Descendants. But if you're like us, you'll know her from Hocus Pocus. She's the much-beloved Kathy Najimy. Join us November 7th to hear Nahita's story.
88% of the work week is spent communicating, typing, talking, and going back and forth on topics until everyone is on the same page. It's time for a change. It's time for Grammarly. Grammarly's AI ensures your team gets the point across the first time, eliminating misunderstandings and streamlining collaboration. It goes beyond basic grammar to help tailor writing to specific audiences, whether that means adding an executive summary, fine-tuning tone, or cutting out jargon in just one click. 4 out of 5 professionals say Grammarly's AI boosts buy-in and moves work forward. It integrates seamlessly with over 500,000 apps and websites, is implemented in days, and is IT approved. Join over 70,000 teams and 30 million people who trust Grammarly to elevate their communication. Visit Grammarly.com/enterprise to learn more. Grammarly, enterprise-ready AI.